Peter Parker has had many love interests over his long history. Gwen Stacy, Felicia Hardy, Mary Jane Watson, Felicia Hardy again, Liz Allen, Felicia Hardy a different time. You can see where I'm going with this. Out of Spider-Man's many love interest characters, there is one in particular who's quite different from the rest. Felicia Hardy, aka the Black Cat, is certainly the most morally dubious person that Spider-Man has ever dated. But this also helps make her, I'm just gonna say this right at the beginning of the video, my favorite Spider-Man love interest, and it is not close. Are Peter and Felicia particularly healthy for each other? No, I don't think they are, but that's also what makes them interesting. Most people know Black Cat from her many and widely varying interactions with Spider-Man, and while those are usually quite fun to read, those alone are not the reason that Felicia is at the top of my list. No, that is because in the last decade or so especially, Black Cat has kind of broken out of the Spider-Man sphere a little bit. She's still very related to Peter and appears in a lot of his comics, but she's also been getting starring roles of her own, and on the whole, those comics have been really, really good. It also definitely doesn't hurt this release schedule that Black Cat is the newest character that was just added to Marvel Rivals. So all that and more is what we're going to be talking about today. So let's go over the history of one of Marvel's greatest thieves, where she started, where she is now, and how those two status quos are somehow both very different from each other and also kind of the same, which sounds weird, but trust me, it'll make sense. But before I get to that, something different today, because this is a sponsored video. So if we could just get the Marvel Rivals stuff off the screen, and I'll talk about that once I've covered the sponsor. Oh, that's right, this Marvel Rivals video is sponsored by Marvel Rivals. Nice. Now, they gave me a whole bunch of notes on new things coming to the game that I'm supposed to tell you about, and I will do that in a second, but I'm gonna lead with something that is not on the script, and I don't think they will mind me starting with this. I have over 500 hours in this game. I have 6 characters at Lord Proficiency or above. I have been playing Marvel Rivals since the closed alpha. I play this game a lot. I don't usually take sponsorships because I won't advertise something that I don't genuinely use, but yeah, I play this game quite a bit, so when they reached out with the sponsorship offer, I took it very quickly. So what is Marvel Rivals? If you're watching my channel, you've probably at least heard of it, but for anyone who somehow hasn't, Marvel Rivals is a third-person hero shooter where you play as a wide range of Marvel characters. The game just entered season 7.5 with the new hero, take a wild guess, Black Cat. Her kit is wild. She's a very mobile melee fighter, and her main gimmick is that her abilities and attacks give her coins, which she can spend on single-use items and enhanced moves. So she has like 12 different abilities that she can do, and a bunch of them have really cool comics connections, which obviously I'll be talking about later. But if you don't like melee or stealthy characters, that's completely fine, because Black Cat is the 49th playable character in the game, and they're adding a new one every single month, so the roster is growing pretty much constantly. They're also adding new PvE modes as of this season. By the time this video releases, the vampire-themed Blood Hunt PvE will already be out, and a couple days later, on April 30th, there's going to be an Avengers one releasing. Marvel Rivals is available completely for free, and that is with all characters automatically unlocked. There's no paying for different characters or free rotations or anything like that. Everyone is always available. If you would like to check it out for yourself, there's a link in the description of this video where you can download it. Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Black Cat, let's talk about her. Felicia Hardy first debuted in Amazing Spider-Man issue 194 in 1979. Now, usually, that would be where I start a character deep dive video like this, going back to their first appearance. But that's not what I'm going to do this time. Instead, I want to take you on a journey very similar to the journey that I went on when researching for this video. There is one series that I would call the definitive Black Cat comic, and it is far more recent than the late 70s. This is the Black Cat self-titled series from 2019, written by Jed MacKay. This book rules. There's a reason that I call it definitive, and we are going to be coming back to it later in this video. But the reason that I'm bringing it up now is because this is technically where I started my research. McKay's Black Cat is, somewhat surprisingly, the first full-length series that Felicia has ever been the title star of, and as such, it functions as a great intro to her character. Spider-Man is barely in this comic at all. Instead, it focuses primarily on Black Cat, her character, her history, her motivations, and all the wild stuff she gets up to. In the first arcs of this comic alone, Felicia successfully steals from Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and the Fantastic Four, very quickly proving her reputation as a master thief, which again, oh boy, we will be talking about in much detail later in the video. But importantly for this part, she doesn't do it alone. This book also introduces Felicia's crew. If you've seen any heist movie, you know any good master thief needs an equally good crew, and these two are Black Cats, Bruno Granger and Dr. Boris Corpse. Granger is Felicia's muscle and wheel man. Before becoming a criminal, he was in the army, and he also loves Elvis and is from Pittsburgh, both things that he brings up very, very frequently. Bruno is a generally easygoing guy, in stark contrast to the other crew member, Dr. Corpse, who is not a medical doctor. In his own words, he's a blowing things up doctor. Yeah, Corpse is a mad scientist through and through. He doesn't have any superpowers or anything like that, but he is a tech and demolitions expert who is perfectly capable of hacking any systems or destroying any systems that he somehow can't hack. Granger and Corpse are fantastic, they are an amazing supporting cast for Black Cat, but what really makes them interesting is how Felicia first met them, because she recruited these guys to break her father out of jail. See, Black Cat's criminal skill is a family legacy. Felicia's father, Walter Hardy, was also a cat burglar, and also one of the best in the world. Not that Felicia knew that for most of her life growing up, she had no idea what her father's real business was. When Felicia was a young adult, Walter was finally arrested and put away for an undefined sentence, but probably life, as both Felicia's parents agreed to tell their young daughter that her father had died instead of actually telling the truth of what he had been up to. Despite the lie, the apple didn't fall far from the tree, and Felicia soon began engaging in heists of her own. This led to her finding out the truth of what had happened to her father, who was an old man at this point, and her vowing to break him out of jail so that he could die at home rather than in prison. This was a difficult job though, and Black Cat was still very new on the scene, so she needed assistance, and she hired two criminals to help her with the operation who would then remain with her going forward. Those two were, of course, Boris Corpse and Bruno Granger. Black Cat's mission was successful, and she did actually break Walter Hardy out of prison, though this was also how she ended up meeting Spider-Man for the first time. And at this point, I want to take a brief pause, because as I've said, this is all stuff from the relatively recent Jed MacKay Black Cat series. This is a very cool origin for Black Cat, right? Unintentionally following in her father's footsteps, then finding out the truth, breaking him out of jail, and teaming up with her crew of cool side characters to get into the supervillain game. I love all that. But since this was 40 years after her debut, I assumed that this was kind of a rework, adding an origin story onto a character who didn't have much of one because this was her first full self-titled series. But whatever, I wasn't mad about that. That's how comic book universes like this work. Things get added onto characters' storylines over time as they get more popular. So once I finished the 2019 Black Cat run, it was time to go for a more historical reading. So now, at this point, I finally went back to 1979's Amazing Spider-Man 194, the first appearance of Black Cat. And oh my god, the storyline is the exact same! Look, I didn't know Black Cat's full history before sitting down to work on this video. I knew the gist of it, of course, but I hadn't read everything, because that's over 45 years of comics at this point. So imagine my surprise when I sat down to read, and the origin hasn't changed. Amazing Spider-Man 194 introduces us to Felicia Hardy, young criminal, daughter of Walter Hardy. Though she didn't know her father, she assumed he was dead, found out that he was also a cat burglar, and decided to break him out of prison so that he could die at home. It is so identical that Boris and Bruno also appear by name in this comic. Do you know how rare that is to find. I connect the dots between these decades-old comics for a living, and you don't see stuff like this. A character, a popular character no less, having such a consistent origin story over 40 years? That's crazy, and I mean that as a compliment. It speaks to the strength of Felicia's origin in a couple ways. It was clearly good back in 1979 when it was written, and it also speaks to how good Jed MacKay is about keeping up canon. So now that I've established how much of a genuine production oddity Black Cat's history is, I can get into the chronological deep dive and the older stuff. I've already given you the rough summary of her debut issue. I've given it to you twice, actually. She's trying to break her dad out of prison, and while she's getting some weapons for this job, that's where she first runs into Peter. Spider-Man and Black Cat's dynamic would be established literally immediately, and I do mean literally. Spider-Man is already attracted to Felicia on the first panel they ever share, and by the second panel, before they've ever spoken a word to each other, he's thinking about asking her out. So despite Black Cat's reputation, Peter was kinda making the first move here. Though she is still a villain, and she's on her way to get illegal guns from a crime lord. So obviously this relationship isn't going to work out, and they're kissing 4 pages later. Okay, that's how this is gonna go. Yeah, the comic wastes absolutely no time making Black Cat Peter's villainous will they won't they love interest. It is very clearly what the character is written for, though again, there is genuinely more depth to her here with the storyline about her dad. She might have been introduced for a very clear reason, but there are layers beyond that. This leads to a few more flirty fights over the next couple of issues, but the relationship does not immediately go anywhere, as Black Cat kinda just wins her first encounter with Spider-Man. She does successfully break her father out of prison, and then she escapes by faking her own death, and she would remain presumably dead for the better part of a year. In her next appearance, she would prove to be alive, caught in another crime spree by Spider-Man, and during the interim of these two comics, her interest in Peter turned a bit obsessive. Yeah, Black Cat's next 2-issue arc takes her in a really weird direction, but bear with me because it is going somewhere that's actually kind of funny. Apparently, she has become so obsessed with Spider-Man that she's built a literal shrine to him in her apartment and was stealing all the precious art from her latest crime spree so that she could give it to Spider-Man as a gesture of love. And she was doing all this to substitute her love for her father. That's not my personal assumption either. It is pretty explicitly stated on the page in a rather uncomfortable way. Thank God her next appearance turned this entirely on its head by confirming that Black Cat was acting weird towards Spider-Man because she was just 100% playing him. Her second appearance ends with Peter taking her to a mental hospital, and her third appearance begins with her immediately breaking out of that mental hospital, confirming in the process that she was only pretending to be so obsessed with Spider-Man because she knew he was nice enough to take her to a care facility instead of jail. And she also assumed, correctly, that she could more easily break out of the care facility than a prison, and so that's why she did all the shrine stuff. It was just a plan B. This provides me a great stopping point to address 2 things. The first being an elephant in the room that I don't really want to bring up, but know that I have to because it's one of those things that the comments will mention if I don't. Felicia Hardy is not romantically obsessed with a teenager. By the time Spider-Man and Black Cat meet for the first time, Peter Parker is a grad student in college, so he is well into his 20s. There is a somewhat famous page that makes the rounds every so often of Black Cat finding out that Peter is a teenager after she kisses him and freaking out. This is not main canon. This is from the original Ultimates universe, and the main version of Felicia never did this. They were both adults by the time they ran into each other. So nothing creepy is happening there, thank God. And with that briefly covered, let me do another more interesting sidebar on Felicia's morality, because that really is a focal point of Black Cat's entire character, and it's very nuanced. In Black Cat's first couple of appearances, she is a villain, very solidly. She's a villain that kisses Spider-Man, sure, but a villain nonetheless. She's here to steal things, be they valuables or her own dad or whatever, and she doesn't have a big morality flip here yet. She is just a bad guy. But of course, as decades have gone on, Black Cat has become a lot more popular and has appeared in many more things. She's been a protagonist, she's been an antagonist, she's had a billion team-ups with heroes and villains alike, but what is she? Is Black Cat a hero or a villain? The answer is kinda neither. A lot of things will call Black Cat an anti-hero, but to be honest, I don't like that classification for her either. Felicia Hardy is not always a hero, but she's not always a villain, and she's not always an anti-hero either. She has been all three of these things at different points in her history. Felicia's morality is extremely inconsistent, but that's not a problem or a flaw in the writing, rather it is very actively the point. This segues very nicely back into the character's chronology, with Black Cat's third arc appearance in Amazing Spider-Man issue 226. This is the storyline that really makes Spider-Man and Black Cat an interesting pairing. They were a bit of a thing before this, but that was just a kiss, some flirting, and a couple of fake-outs. This comic actually gives them a character dynamic. See, Felicia doesn't really have any grand ambitions, at least not in the supervillain sense of the word. She's not trying to take over the world, she's not even really stealing for the money, she steals because she wants to. When she has something that she's set her sights on, she's going to do anything in her power to get it. And if the object of her desire happens to be, say, Spider-Man, then her methods are going to shift. Issue 226 is about Black Cat promising Spider-Man that she's going to give up her life of crime and even join him in being a superhero. Peter is skeptical of this, of course, but then she helps him take down a criminal gang, and that proves her dedication enough. So the two get together for the first official time, though it is worth noting that at this point, Felicia has still not seen Peter's whole face and has no idea who he is under the mask. Things go well for a very brief time, but then Felicia's nature gets the better of her, and she goes out thieving again. She tells both Spider-Man and herself that it's for a good cause. This is her heist one last job moment, something that will make them enough money that she'll never have to do any crime again. But she had already promised Spider-Man that she wasn't going to do crime, and now she's out stealing this jewel, so that's clearly a betrayal of trust. The hero and thief have a big falling out, Felicia escapes again, and then the arc is over. Once again, it's a very quick storyline. For the third time in a row, Black Cat has showed up in 2 issues and then left for a while. But this time, she's leaving behind quite the character dynamic. From this point on, Black Cat has been set up as a foil to Peter Parker's entire deal, because fundamentally, the two are very similar. Both Black Cat and Spider-Man are capable, stealthy superhumans. I know I haven't mentioned Black Cat having superpowers yet, that's a whole thing, I'm going to get into it shortly, but it's clear that they could fit well into each other's roles. Black Cat is smart and agile enough to keep up with heroes like Spider-Man, so she could fight crime, and Spider-Man, I mean, he could be the best thief in the world if he wanted. Because of this, the fundamental tension between Peter and Felicia is both of them trying to influence the other, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, into their way of life. Felicia knows that Peter is perfectly capable of taking whatever he wants, and with his capabilities, he wouldn't even have to be violent about it. The two of them could get in and out of anywhere, taking anything, and screw whoever they're taking from. They could lead a happy life together. But anyone who knows the first thing about Spider-Man knows that that's never going to happen. We've all heard it. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. Peter Parker is not going to become a master thief. But because he's such a good guy, and also because Peter Parker is often very sad and lonely and depressed, sorry Peter, but it is just kind of objectively true, he's not giving up on Felicia either. Peter sees the good in Felicia, and there is absolutely good there to see. Black Cat isn't evil. She doesn't really want to hurt anybody. She's just extremely selfish, and when she wants something, she will go through most obstacles in her way to get it. But there is another dimension to that, one that complicates things a lot by being kind of a paradox. Felicia Hardy is an extremely selfish person, but she is also somehow loyal to a fault. Getting Felicia to care about you is a difficult thing because it is often determined only by her own whims, but on the rare occasions that she cares about somebody, her loyalty is undying. Black Cat has saved Spider-Man at great risk to herself countless times. Her crew, Boris and Bruno, she will go to hell and back for them. Remember, her first appearance was breaking her dad, whom she had never met, out of jail. Maybe most impressively, Black Cat still has a good relationship with her mom. Yeah, Felicia Hardy's mom is still alive in current canon and knows that her daughter is the Black Cat, yet they still somehow have a positive relationship. In a recent comic, Felicia staged an entire operation to cure her mom's cancer by manipulating the wielders of the Infinity Stones, which, needless to say, was incredibly risky. So not even literal cosmic forces can stand in the way of Felicia if she's trying to help someone she loves. And therein lies why Black Cat is a good character, and why I brought up her morality being inconsistent earlier. The best way to describe Black Cat's morality is that she's incredibly selfish until she isn't. With that important context established, we go back to the chronology, and another very important point in it, because Felicia Hardy's next appearance is her first real long-running relationship with Spider-Man, and I choose the word Spider-Man there very intentionally. This arc begins in Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, issue 75, where Peter and Felicia fight Dr. Octopus, and Black Cat is heavily wounded in the process. She survives this time, not even faking her own death, but her injuries cause Peter to reconsider the possibility of a relationship. Spider-Man helps her through recovery, and due to his positive influence, Felicia's morality begins to swing back towards the heroic side. They even go out fighting a couple of villains towards the end of the arc, and then Peter finally decides that she has changed enough that he can reveal his secret identity to her, which Felicia doesn't want at all. We've established already that getting Felicia Hardy to care about somebody is very difficult, but once she does, that is pretty well locked in. And her relationship has been locked in with Spider-Man, not with Peter Parker. And since Peter Parker is very much the secret identity kind of hero, those are basically two separate lives, and Black Cat is only interested in one of them. When Felicia sees Peter Parker's face for the first time, she doesn't react well, and this isn't anything against Peter specifically, it's just that, well, she's in love with Spider-Man, and I mean that in the most literal and direct way that I possibly can. Obviously, this is a major relationship issue that can't be easily fixed, so they break up. Just kidding. No, they stay together after this. This arc continues for like a whole year after this. They stay together. Black Cat and Spider-Man are superhero partners fighting crime, and also romantic partners, and Peter just never fully takes off the Spider-Man mask when they're together. And Peter, buddy, I get it actually. I can't blame him. I think I would too. In addition to Peter's questionable but understandable decisions, this is also the arc that begins to flesh out Black Cat's superpowers. So now I get to go into that as I promised earlier. This sounds like it's going to be another sidebar segment, but no, this is very plot relevant here. Black Cat does have superpowers, for sure. She's actually a cyborg, which not a lot of people know, but that's largely just because her powers are handled very strangely. Different projects vary wildly in how they address it. In current comics canon, though, like what you'd find if you picked a new issue off the shelf right now, she has two main abilities. The first off is claws, like literal claws. Felicia has cybernetic enhancements in her hands, so she can extend her nails into sharp and durable weapons. The second is a bad luck aura. Now, the exact specifics of this ability have shifted quite a bit over the years. She's even gained and lost the power entirely on a few occasions, but typically, she just has a machine inside her body that manipulates quantum probabilities and makes her opponents experience bad luck. She cannot control this power, though in current canon she can at least turn it off and on at will, but she can't specifically control what happens. She just knows that whatever her opponents do, they will be unlucky during it. Going back to the sponsor very briefly, Black Cat does have this power in her Marvel Rivals kit. I wasn't sure if they were going to add it, but they did give her a passive. After she hits somebody with her melee, she applies a debuff to them that makes their critical hits just sometimes not work. So if your opponent gets a crit on you, sometimes it just won't do extra damage because they're unlucky. Is that a kind of stupid ability? Oh yeah, it's very stupid, but it is also the exact right amount of stupid to be hilarious and very clever, so I love it. Getting back to the comics though, this is where things get a little bit weird. Felicia showed this power in her original appearance. When she first showed up, this is how she was able to keep up with Spider-Man as a relatively amateur thief. She had some sort of bad luck power, and so Spider-Man just had a hard time fighting her. But they never actively acknowledge this as a superpower and keep calling it her bad luck tricks, kind of implying that these were things that she orchestrated beforehand, kind of a booby trap situation, even though it never really makes sense for them to be booby traps and really reads more like a superpower. But then this kind of just gets dropped entirely, and it becomes a point of drama in later arcs that Felicia is a regular person. While she is officially together with Spider-Man and fighting crime alongside him, she's worried that she's weighing him down and being a potential risk since he has superpowers and she is just a regular human. So she starts looking for a way to give herself powers so that she can keep up with her partner, in more ways than one, I guess, and she ends up getting abilities from the Kingpin. And those powers are the bad luck aura thing. So we've kind of just looped around to the status quo that everyone thought she had originally, that just got officially canonized. Whatever, I don't really care how we got there, as long as we did. Turns out that this was a very bad idea though, because Kingpin was doing something shady and lied to Felicia about how her new powers worked. Shocking. See, at this stage, she couldn't actually turn the aura on and off, that was something she would gain later, but Kingpin promised that the aura would kind of work in a way similar to Spider Sense and would only affect people who meant her harm. This was not true. It affected everybody around her, and Kingpin intentionally gave her this ability because she was fighting crime alongside Spider-Man. So he was basically trying to debuff Spider-Man through Black Cat. This, I gotta say, was a pretty good plan on Kingpin's part, and it did work flawlessly. Being by Felicia's side actively made Spider-Man worse at fighting crime, and this, not the whole mask thing, which was still ongoing, was finally what made the couple break up. This is where we really reach the long on-again, off-again period, and kind of the middle point in Black Cat's history that I'm going to skim a little faster because there's a later arc that I want to spend a lot more time on. Even after the two broke up, Black Cat remained in Spider-Man's life at kind of random times. She would appear in a lot of Spider-Man comics, sometimes as a hero, sometimes as a villain, sometimes just as a regular person being petty. One time, after she returned from an international adventure that she was on for a while, she found out that Peter Parker got married to Mary Jane Watson. And so Felicia started dating Flash Thompson just to make Peter jealous, because she is that type of person. Hilariously though, that actually worked out pretty well for everyone involved, and Felicia Hardy and Mary Jane became friends, and they remain friends even in current canon. Felicia's still kind of jokingly bitter at MJ, but it is as a joke, and they are on good terms. They have somewhat frequent team-ups. But as I said, this is the era that I'm going to be skimming a little bit faster, largely just because there's so many minor things to cover. During this period, there is simply too many small Black Cat storylines for me to cover in any effective amount of time. She'll be a hero for a bit, then she'll be a villain again, she'll get with Spider-Man, she'll break up with Spider-Man, she'll be on a hero team, then she'll leave the hero team, and so many other random tiny one-off appearances. A personal favorite of mine is one issue of a Cloak and Dagger comic where Felicia is teaching Dagger how to date, and part of her instruction is that if the guy they're going out with is boring, then they should skip out on the date and steal their wallets in the process. Equally wild, but a very different type of wild, is a mini-series called Claws, which stars Black Cat and Wolverine having a team-up. Yeah, they had a team-up called Claws, and it was evidently successful enough that they released another mini-series called Claws 2. Oh, this is also the period where her powers did finally stabilize. She gained and lost similar sets of abilities a bunch of times over a couple of decades, but in 2010, she got the retractable claws and the more predictable, less evil luck engine thing, and that is where her abilities have stayed. Her next major status quo shift would happen in the mid-2010s, and speaking as someone who was finally getting into modern and newly releasing comics at the time, this was a little bit controversial when it happened, but it would end in a very good and interesting place for her character, so I'm gonna present it as it was. Starting in 2014, several comics within the Spider-Man sphere began to feature Black Cat more consistently again, but as a villain. Like, fully villain, more actively villainous than she had ever been before. For the vast majority of her history up to this point, I think I've proven well enough that Felicia Hardy just kind of does whatever she wants. I mentioned pretty obviously that she doesn't have any grand supervillain ambitions. She just takes things. But that all changed here, because now she was set on becoming New York City's newest crime lord. And since she already had a grudge against Kingpin because of the whole bad luck sabotage thing years earlier, who better to take a shot at? Thus, for several years, Black Cat was one of the major players in the New York City crime scene, declaring herself the Queen Pin. Now, people have mixed feelings on this period of Black Cat's history. On the one hand, it is kind of cool to see her being a more major character and having a more active role in the New York City crime stuff that's happening. But on the other hand, a lot of people, understandably, felt like making her so actively villainous was a bit of a character assassination. Thus, it didn't last for too long, but they did fix it in a way that I think is pretty good. One thing that had remained very purposefully consistent through Black Cat's history was the presence of Peter Parker. Whether they were dating or not, or fighting or not, or both on occasion, Peter was always a very relevant part of her life. In the later stages of their original on-again, off-again thing, she'd even grown more attached to Peter, like Peter specifically the man under the mask, and though Felicia dated other people in the interim, it would always come back to her and Peter. And then, Civil War happened. Yeah, I bet people who didn't know Black Cat's history weren't expecting that event of all of them to be very relevant here, but whoo boy, it is. Very quick crash course on this, because I do not have time to get into all of Civil War. Peter Parker started out on Team Iron Man, but then ended up switching sides to Team Captain America. While he was on Team Iron Man though, as a show of faith, he revealed his identity as Peter Parker publicly to everyone. This eventually became a big problem as criminals started targeting Peter Parker's loved ones, and so as part of a larger deal with Mephisto, Peter Parker's identity was removed from public knowledge. And this included Felicia Hardy. That then became the explanation for why Black Cat had a sort of character shift villain arc for a couple of years. Peter Parker was a very core part of her memories, and getting all of that forcibly ripped out of her head removed Peter Parker's good influence on her and also kind of drove her insane, leading her to become a straight-up villain for a while. Is this a retcon to the original character shift? Yes, it absolutely is. I do not think that was the original writing intent. However, I do really like that as a good world-building excuse, so I'm gonna allow it. This got resolved by Peter revealing his identity to her again, which kind of patched up her mental state. And now, we've finally looped back around to the beginning of the video with 2019's Black Cat series by Jed MacKay. I gave you the quick summary of it earlier, now we're gonna get to go into a lot more detail, which will also loop back to Marvel Rivals. Neat. I told you earlier that the origin of Black Cat presented in this series is basically shot for shot what it was in 1979. And that is true, but there is one more aspect added. See, the original storyline had not a plot hole per se, but at the very least a little bit of a gap. How did Felicia Hardy become a master criminal? Yes, she was the daughter of Walter Hardy, a master criminal himself, but she didn't know him. The comic pretty explicitly says that she only found out information on him secondhand and became the Black Cat completely independently before learning what her father did for a living. How she managed this is never really addressed. There's like a panel or two saying that she spent years training, but that's it. The Jed MacKay series decides to give that a little bit more detail, and it does this through the Black Fox. Black Fox, real name completely unknown, is not a supervillain, but he is definitely a villain. He is a gentleman thief archetype. I'm sure we're all decently familiar with the type. He's the master planner pulling off museum heists and things like that, doing it for the money, sure, but more for the love of the game than anything else. Decades ago, the Black Fox was the best and most wanted criminal in the entire world. But as he got up there in age, he wanted to continue his legacy, so he took on apprentices. And one of those apprentices was Walter Hardy. Walter eventually grew up, and after learning everything he could from the fox, went out to do his own jobs, but this eventually landed him in prison. And sometime after that, Black Fox, now an even older man, found out that Walter's daughter was unknowingly following the footsteps of the legacy. So he approached Felicia to train her too. This is where Black Cat learned all of her tricks, from the same master criminal that trained her father. And this is largely what the Jed McKay Black Cat series revolves around. Felicia has now also grown up and gone off to do her own business, and then Black Fox reappears in her life. Now, I'm going to give you fair warning here. I'm about to spoil this entire series. I have to, because there are Marvel Rivals Easter eggs that are very fun and very impressive. But also, this is a very, very, very good comic, so this is your one spoiler warning. Here it is. So now you might be wondering, why did Black Fox reappear? Why did this extremely old man approach Felicia Hardy again? Well, it's a one last job moment. This is a book about heists. Of course it's a one last job thing. Bit of a world-building context sidebar here. The Marvel Universe has these things called the Thieves Guilds. You might be vaguely familiar with these from other characters. Gambit especially is associated with them. The other Thieves Guilds are not particularly relevant to this video, somewhat surprisingly, but the New York City Thieves Guild is special. And by special, I mean completely exiled and separate from all the other ones, which is why the other ones aren't relevant. See, the Thieves Guilds are a magic thing, and most of them have the same magical patron, a woman named Chandra, but the New York City Thieves Guild made Chandra mad, they got separated from everybody else, and they needed to find a new patron to keep up their magical benefits, which are primarily immortality. Yeah, they're cool, shady, immortal magic thieves. They control all of the crime in the city at a high level, and all the major criminal players have to pay them essentially a tax of 10%. And then the Thieves Guild sends that 10% to their magical patron, and their patron makes all of their elite immortal. Of course, this doesn't pass down to the normal thieves, it's only the head honchos, but I feel like that's expected for this kind of group. Here's the thing that gets really, really cool, especially for Marvel Rivals players. The magical patron that the New York City Thieves Guild serves, it's the Gilded Saint. This giant, opulent skeleton man that's also in this season of Marvel Rivals. Yeah, if you've seen the giant skeleton hand that Kingpin is interacting with in the new Rivals map for Season 7, that's the Gilded Saint. And that's what this storyline is all about. It's about Kingpin trying to make a deal with the Gilded Saint to increase his power, and then Felicia kind of hijacks it, which is why her kit is all about using cool magical items that she pays for with coins. The lore reason that she's getting all those items is she is sending payment to the Gilded Saint, who is then giving her magic stuff in return as part of the deal. Here's the thing that makes this little bit of lore so impressive, at least to me. The Gilded Saint is not a major Marvel character. It has only been in 4 issues ever, all of which are in the Jed McKay Black Cat run. I've said before, in unsponsored videos no less, that Marvel Rivals and NetEase continue to impress me with the pulls that they get for this game, and the Gilded Saint is maybe the best example of that to date. The only way you put the Gilded Saint in your game, as a main villain no less, is by having someone on your team who genuinely, truly knows and loves Black Cat as a character, and is willing to put in the work to get a comics-accurate storyline for her. Screw the sponsorship for a second. Like, yes, they are still paying for this video, obviously, but I swear to Khonshu, these are my genuine opinions. Marvel Rivals knows ball. It's like they took the comic books and just pulled them right off the page and made a video game out of exactly that. I continue to be so impressed by the stuff they do for this game. You see why I took the sponsorship? Okay, now back to the comics again. Where did I leave off? The Thieves Guild exists. They are a bunch of criminal elite who are all made immortal through a deal with the Gilded Saint. And also, Black Fox is back, a very old man wanting to do his one last job moment. If you put these two things together, you might be able to see where this is going. Black Fox wants to heist the Thieves Guild's immortality. This is the real plot of the Jed McKay Black Cat comic. Black Fox, Black Cat, and her crew are going to be stealing a bunch of things from heroes so that they can crack a portal into the interdimensional vault where the Gilded Saint lives and get Black Fox's immortality. One tiny hang up in that though, Black Fox, he didn't tell Felicia that's what the plan was. Yeah, I did warn you I was going to spoil this whole comic. This is the very big spoiler. Throughout this whole thing, Black Fox was telling everybody that he just wanted to rip off the Thieves Guild as a big heist to secure his legacy. He didn't tell everybody that immortality was the plan. And the price for immortality, that's a pretty big one to pay. This is a heist storyline after all. There has to be a twist or double cross of some kind. And the twist in this case is that Black Fox is not just going to steal immortality from the Gilded Saint, he's going to make a deal from him. And that deal is immortality in exchange for Manhattan. Like the island of Manhattan and everything and everyone on it. The crew steals the deed to Manhattan, like the original one from centuries ago, and because of weird magic nonsense, this actually does give the Gilded Saint possession over it. So it starts pulling Manhattan into its weird Hell Vault dimension, and Black Cat has to stop it. Yeah, this comic gets crazy by the end. I really do recommend reading it for yourself, as I think I've already said a couple of times. And it also ends in a really effective emotional place that works great for Felicia's character. I've already made it clear that one of Felicia's core character traits is undying loyalty, and this is something she actually shares with Black Fox. Yes, he kind of double-crossed her and hid his intentions, but that's just because he knew she wouldn't go along with it. When it came down to actually making the deal, he didn't just bargain for immortality for himself, he also made Felicia immortal, as he truly did love her and kind of see her as an adopted daughter. This is a kind gesture in a way, but Black Cat does have morals, there is a line that she will not cross, and trading all of Manhattan and all the lives in it for immortality is well over that line. So Felicia has to once again double-cross and kill Black Fox, her mentor and essentially father figure. And oh my god, this scene hits incredibly hard. Look, I said right in the intro of the video that Black Cat is my personal favorite love interest for Spider-Man, but whoo boy, if you want proof that she can stand on her own as a character too, this is the comic that'll prove it. Of course, this doesn't mean that her character is different when she's on her own in a book. She is still the same Felicia Hardy. She's very flirtatious, very vengeful at times, and you can see that with the other villains of this comic. For example, the leader of the New York City Thieves Guild, Odessa Drake, who is something of a rival to Black Cat. She tries to kill Felicia on several occasions. They really don't like each other, and Felicia, don't do an enemies to lovers arc. Felicia! Okay, so she does an enemies to lovers arc, and she also does a lovers to enemies arc with an old ex-girlfriend in the same comic. And then whatever she's got going on with Spider-Man, which is like enemies to lovers to enemies to lovers to enemies to... I could go on. This Jed MacKay series was pretty popular with readers. It ran for a few years, it's like 7 volumes long, and the status quo for Felicia has largely remained consistent even since it ended. Even Boris and Bruno are still around. Sometimes when a comic changes writers, a lot of side characters will get dropped. Not this time. Felicia's crew are still active members of her storyline, which makes me very happy. Most of her appearances since that comic ended have been one-offs or quick arcs. She had a team-up miniseries with Mary Jane Watson. She got to do a heist with her dad because of Kang time travel nonsense. She's also teamed up with Doctor Strange. Actually, you know what? I want to spend a whole couple minutes on her relationship with Doctor Strange. Amazingly, Black Cat and Doctor Strange have one of my favorite dynamics in comics right now, because they're definitely not friends, but they are kind of reluctant friends, I guess. Felicia has stolen from the Sanctum Sanctorum on a few occasions in recent years alone, both because she's just an effective enough thief to pull that off, and also her bad luck powers are a really, really good counter to magic. Enemy magic just kind of doesn't work around her because it requires such specific conditions that can get so easily messed up by a bit of bad luck. If the spellcaster is very adept, they can work through it, but anyone less than a master, yeah, Felicia's just going to be entirely immune to their spells. Is Felicia's repeated thievery annoying for Strange? Yeah, it absolutely is. But Stephen Strange is also a very practical man, and he knows that Felicia is not incredibly villainous at heart. So sometimes when he needs a thief, he's gonna call Black Cat. There's a fantastic little 2-issue arc where Doctor Strange is fighting a sentient, evil tabletop RPG, and to beat it, he has to play by the game's rules, which means he needs to assemble a party of fantasy fighters, and they have to fit into tabletop RPG classes. That means he needs a thief, and so he goes to Felicia. He doesn't really want to, but that's the best option he has. This leads to one of my favorite Black Cat scenes ever, where Doctor Strange's wife, Clea, questions why Stephen is close enough with a woman who looks vaguely like her, and then they all immediately realize that no, Doctor Strange and Black Cat are not romantically compatible at all. Also, just a little extra Easter egg note that I think is hilarious. This book is also written by Jed MacKay, and the entire party of characters that Strange assembles are the protagonists of other Jed MacKay books. So he just took all his favorite characters that he got to write and threw them into one fantasy party purely because he could. And I respect him for that. Returning to Felicia Hardy, though, she does have a currently running comic series. As of this recording, issue 9 just came out a couple of weeks ago, but per my usual policies, I do not go into detail about currently running series. All that I will say is that it seems to be following her going through another hero arc, as Spider-Man is busy with other stuff, and she's kind of trying to fill his shoes. We'll see where it ends up. But that does transition very nicely into the conclusion of the video, which I want to begin with a callback to something I said way closer to the beginning about Black Cat's morality. I said that she's not always a hero, and I said she's not always a villain, and I said that she's not always an anti-hero. All of those terms kind of describe her at various points, but none of them are a good fit for her character as a whole. But despite all the purposeful inconsistency, there is one word that describes Felicia Hardy well. Felicia Hardy is a thief. It is as simple as that. Maybe she's a villainous thief, basically a Spider-Man bad guy. Maybe she's a heroic thief, stealing from the villains so they can't complete their plans. Maybe she's something in the middle, a Robin Hood type, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. Or just keeping it, she does that too. Her motives and morality might change, but at the end of the day, she will always be a thief, and she will always protect her own. Heroes can't change that, villains can't change that, Spider-Man can't change that, giant golden skeleton gods from another dimension can't change that. There truly is no other classification that properly suits her other than thief. So I guess to summarize all of this, if Black Cat wants something, probably best to stay out of her way. Thank you all so much for watching. As usual, I hope you enjoyed, and also extra thank you to Marvel Rivals for sponsoring this video. I said all the promo stuff way at the beginning, but again, there is a link to download the game completely for free in the description of this video if you would like to try it out. Also in the description, you can find a link to my Patreon, where you can get early and ad-free access to all of my videos, as well as a Patreon exclusive video every month. There are over 6 hours of exclusive content on there and counting. Of course, extra double thank you to people who already support me over there. It really does help me keep making these videos for you guys. And once again, as always, one more shout out to Ruben Perez, the artist I work with for these videos. He drew the poses of the character that's been talking at you for the last 50 minutes or so. Go check out his other work if you have a chance. And now, I mean, it feels weird to say after spending a lot of time recording a sponsored video for them, but I legitimately am gonna go play Marvel Rivals now. I am very close to getting White Fox to Lord proficiency already, so I'm gonna go and finish that. See ya!